Welcome, Rod Smith, to one of URL Unzip Reboot and Leave podcast. Rod Smith, how are you, man?
Thank you, Gautam. I'm well, and thank you for the welcome. I hope you're well too.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful sunny day in Melbourne.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so Rod Smith, he was a sort of serious serial entrepreneur, and predominantly in later stage, he worked as a coach in various industries. So we will today talk with that coach aspect from him and his experience, and as he is in his 70s, so that means definitely a lot of wisdom he has gathered throughout his life. And I know him personally for last more than a decade. So it's my pleasure, Rod, to have you on this.
Thank you,
So
Gautam. Good to be with you, as they say.
So the first question, which I would like to know, because I also get confused sometimes, what is the difference between mentoring and coaching?
Yeah, it's a pretty good question, that one, because it is confusing for a lot of people. But to me, there's sort of one end of the scale is the coach, and the other end of the scale is the mentor. A mentor at one end of the scale is a sort of a dictator, somebody who is saying to the person, this is the way you should do it. Do it this way and follow me. Do it exactly as I tell you. And that's a mentor. Um, on the other end of the scale is a coach who says, is in other words, or sorry, a coach is actually going to say that not do it, but have you thought about doing it this way? And in using the coach's experience to ask questions and get the coachee to establish what they want to do, but based on some suggestions. But it's not a do this, do that. It's more of a questioning and a way of encouraging the coachee to think about certain things using the coach's experience. So it's more of a nurturing and there are sort of there are scales between. And sometimes when I've been coaching, I've had to go from being a coach and asking lots of questions to almost being a mentor and saying, well, I think you should do it this way. And that's sort of in the middle of the middle of the spectrum, if you like.
Okay. So as a coach and as a mentor, in both cases, emotion is one of the things you have to look after the client or the individual group.
Yeah, well, a coach is all about there's a lot of emotion involved. There's a lot of getting the coachee to feel, understand the way they feel as well as the way they are acting, because the way they are feeling often impacts the way they act. So somebody who's got a very angry sort of personality will always come across that, or can often come across that way. And somebody who's got a mild and meek manner, again, will come across that way. And sometimes it's a case of encouraging certain aspects of that personality to come through. But yes, you have to involve, thoughts and feelings as well as actions.
Right. And as you are doing it more than a decade now, how first is how it is, how relevant it is, and how it is evolving.
Yeah, well, in fact, probably 20 years now, because when I first did my coaching training, did a qualification in coaching, and it was very much at that stage uh, the kind of difference between I guess a sports coach, because again, I've been a sports coach in the past,
Oh,
and
yes.
and um, and so sports people of all sorts have coaches. So why wouldn't everybody have a coach of some sort? Because a coach will help a tennis player improve and set certain goals and help them achieve those goals. Why not the same thing for anybody in their normal walk of life? So
Right.
that was the way it started. The way it's evolved, I think, probably similar in a way, but I guess there was less. 20 years ago, there was less knowledge of coaching. Now it's much more commonplace. And so it's evolved to a point where I think coaches used to be generalists and they're becoming more and more specific. So if I want a coach to coach me on finance, I'll pick somebody who's got a financial background. If I want to have a coach who has good experience in, say, the retail trade, then I'll pick somebody who has got that kind of experience. So I think experience of certain aspects that the coaching is looking for is more relevant now far more relevant than it used to be.
Right. Right. So basically, people are looking for skin in the game type of thing. I mean,
Yes,
when
they're looking to get specific things from the coach
right,
based on that coach's own background.
right. Okay. Uh, Unfortunately, a lot of people are going through redundancy these days. Okay. I personally have seen in 2008-9 during GFC, the global financial crisis. You
Yep.
definitely seen in 2000 also during dot-com bubble. So, but it's not that big, but still a lot of people are going through that. Okay. I have few questions on that. First of all, let's say someone got that redundancy letter and they probably have 1 month to go or just finished. Okay. What they should do from that point of time, mindset wise and task wise.
Well, I would almost go back to a stage before that, before they've actually got the redundancy letter. Generally speaking, people will get a feeling for what's happening in the workplace. They're going to, they may not necessarily expect a redundancy. I've been made redundant myself from a company that I didn't expect it. But generally, often enough, you'll get a feeling that it may happen. And if that's the case, then perhaps at that stage start to prepare what your plan is for the next stage of your life. And if you've got the letter, well, okay. Number one, I suppose it's what's the that comedy or The Meaning of Life, was it, or something that said don't panic. So don't panic. Number one, because there are always going to be opportunities. The next thing to do is to have a really long, hard process of thinking about what you really want to do. And if if you can, if it's possible, then what you should be looking at is how to look at the sort of things that you do well and you're passionate about. Because if you are, if you're passionate about something and you want to do it, then you'll probably do it very, very well.
Yeah.
So that kind of, I've got when I was coaching, I had a plan, a sort of a personal plan that people could go through, and this is a good time to do that because you're at a changing point in your life. I've done the same thing at a crisis point in my life. I sat down, had a whole weekend where I just wrote down pages and pages of things, possibilities of things I could do, wanted to do, and eventually came through with a clear plan of what I was going to do. And that made it so much easier from my perspective. So I think it's, and then the next thing I suppose is once you've got that clear plan, it's where you want to be, the destination. You've then got to say, well, how am I going to get there? What's the best way of achieving that particular role that I'm looking for? and think about lots of different things that you can do, of people that you have contact with. One thing I've found very, very useful is if, for example, you've decided I want to be a project manager, I'm just picking that as an example, then who do you know who is a very, very good project manager? It could be somebody that you know personally, it could be somebody that you know through somebody else. But if you can get in front of that person and sit down with him or her and say, okay, what do you do that makes you such a good project manager? And learn from it. So most people will be happy to talk about themselves. So you get in front of that project manager, he or she, they're going to say, well, this is what I did, this is what I did, and I'll be happy to do that. But you can pick up things from them that will help you in terms of getting that particular role that you're looking for. So learning from experts or people who are very good at what they do is a good way of progressing your goals, if you like, in terms of what you're trying to achieve. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yes. Now, as I said, like I have few questions on that. So, next thing is people started doing is they go to a lot of websites, the job searching sites, and they started applying. And after maybe 2 weeks or 1 month, depend on the tolerance level, they become frustrated and say we are kept applying and nothing is happening.
Yep.
Any tips on that?
Yes. My son very said when he got made redundant, and he said, well, when I'm looking for a job, Dad, what I have to do, I have to make it a project. So it's a number of things, number of people that you've got to be talking to. You can sort of give yourself goals as to, I need to talk to 3 people, 4 people today, and each day for the next whenever it is. But just set yourself some goals as to what you're trying to achieve. And the second thing is, yeah, those sort of ads that come up in the websites and so on, they can be frustrating, because what's happening is that when you're applying for that role, 100 other people are doing it too. Perhaps more. 200 people might be applying for the same job, and
And sometimes same job is being advertised by 5, 6, or 10 vendors.
yes. Um, so your chances of success are not great based on those numbers. So therefore, what you've got to do is try and give yourself an advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And the advantage I think you can get is by being a bit more proactive. Instead of just saying, okay, I want this job, I'm going to apply for it formally, whatever, you can often get on the phone and talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always easy. I'm not saying you can, but when you can, get on the phone and say, what's this all about? I want to make sure that I'm the right fit for the role, and that's for my purposes and your purposes. And that way, it does 2 things. Number one, you give yourself visibility with that potential employer. And the second thing you're doing is you're getting to understand a bit more about the role and the sort of things that they will be looking for at the interview stage.
Right.
They may be asking questions, the employer may be asking questions that you can say, okay, I understand a bit about what you're doing. And this is you've got time to sort of think about what your response will be to that. Sorry, you were going to say something, Gautam?
Okay. So on that, uh, what happens is these days, in let's say 10 years back, always there used to be a contact name and a number
Yes.
with a job advertisement. Okay.
Yes.
So it's easy to just pick the phone up and have a chat.
Mm.
Now, in these days, what I noticed also, many times there are no contacts, and many times a contact number is given, but it's actually just a reception of the office.
Mhm.
So when like someone is calling there, normally the answer is, okay, someone will get back to you. And as usual, most of the time, no one actually call you back,
Mm.
like rejection letter or rejection call or whatever.
Yeah.
So how people can bypass that?
Yeah. Uh, it's not an easy one. The
Hmm.
but one of the things that you can do is if there isn't a telephone number, there's going to be a response somewhere that says, to respond, to apply for the job, you have to fill in this form, whatever it might be. Um, Sometimes you can actually just send an email to say, uh, I'd like to apply for this role, but I just want to get a bit more background. Is there somebody I can talk to? Um, can you give me the contact? So again, it's sort of being a bit bold. You may not necessarily get what you want, but the bolder you are, the more recognized they'll be when it comes to interviews. So, and then another option is to, okay, I'm applying to, and I'll pick an example, IBM. Um, and IBM have got this role, and who do I know in IBM? Do I
Yeah,
have a contact there? Do I have somebody on the inside I can ring and say, hey, John, what about this particular role? I'm thinking of applying for it. Do you know anything about it? Now, they may not necessarily know, but they can probably do a little bit of digging on your behalf and get a bit of background. And they could even possibly give you the name of somebody that you can talk to. So it's being a bit devious, but hey, any point of advantage you can get, just go for it.
right.
So that's one thing. The other thing is to um, use your network. And I know that you and I, Gautam, have often talked about it, but there's a network of people that you know who will be possibly able to help you, because just ringing them up and saying, hey, I'm looking for some work. Do you know of anywhere that there's happening in your firm, or do you know anybody? And just spreading the word, just talking to people in your network, because often enough, the jobs that are not advertised are the ones that you stand the best chance of getting. Because if you can be ahead of the game, hey, they haven't applied. There's no formal application for this job. I know they're going to be looking for somebody, and I can give an example of that where a friend of mine was looking for a role. Um, I knew the person who was going to be advertising the role, and way ahead of time, before it ever got advertised, I put the two of them in touch with each other, and that was successful. They went on to get the role, but that was before the official process had already started. So getting ahead of the game, using your network, is just vital in those situations. The other thing is the psychology of it, because I know when I was made redundant one time, I felt pretty bad. You know,
Right.
I, you know, I was a bit of a sook. I ended up, for a couple of weeks, I was thinking, poor me, poor me. And it's easy for that to happen. But what you have to do is to,
I would like to elaborate a little bit on that from my
yep,
personal experience,
yep,
because people who are in these developed countries, in whatever industry, they also know about this joblessness, redundancy, and get another job and all these things, and they
yep,
adjust their life according to that.
yep,
People who are coming, like immigrant professionals who came to this country with a job, many of them, typically IT, Indian, like ecosystem, if you like, people
yep,
who are in their 40s or even late 30s, first time in their life, they became aware that, job can go. And because it is happening first time in their life with no hiccups at all in their 15, 16, or 20 years of career, they even more shattered,
yep.
right? And many of them got directionless for a few years, actually. So So this is also happening. Now, please tell your emotional side how they can look after that. So anyway, don't panic. That's one thing. That's major. And then
Yep.
please go ahead.
Yeah. I guess I'm pretty fortunate in the sense that I'm from an English speaking background. I've emigrated from UK to New Zealand and then from New Zealand to Australia. I've been fortunate in that I speak English, that I know the culture. It's
Right,
a sort of European culture. That's the way I describe it.
right.
Um, Despite the fact that it's a multicultural society, primarily
Yes.
it's a culture of something that's close to the UK, close to Europe. You know, there's been a lot of European migrants and so on. um, and it is difficult because I was fortunate enough when I went to New Zealand, I had a job, and that was fine. I was well looked after. The company looked after me. The people were really good, and I managed to fit in pretty quickly. When I
Mm-hmm.
came to Australia, it was different, and because I came across to Australia without a job. I just moved here. Um, my ex-wife was from Melbourne, so I moved to Melbourne with her, and and I didn't know anybody, absolutely nobody, and it was hard. I went through the process of applying for a lot of roles, and and I'd had some pretty senior roles in New Zealand, and I kept getting asked the question, well, what have you done here? Well, hang on, I've just arrived. I've only just arrived in Australia. What am I supposed to? What work will I've supposed to have been done in Australia? All the
Mm.
work's been done in New Zealand. And as I said, I had general management roles and sales management roles in New Zealand. It almost didn't seem to count.
Yeah,
Um, and I didn't have a football team, you know, and I didn't know what Australian rules football was.
absolutely.
So I think if I had to think about what I I lacked at that time, was just an understanding of the Australian culture, and it was different from New Zealand, and particularly, as I said, I had no contact. Eventually, I managed to find a good company and got a role as a consultant, and sort of took my career took off from that. But it took me several months of knocking on doors and talking to a lot of people and getting a lot of rejections. So that's not easy, but
Yes,
I think one of the one of the things that is really important is to have, and I know it's hard to do when you're getting knocked back, but to keep that positive attitude.
yes,
It's very hard to do it, but one of the things that I've always done as an employee, and as I've explained to my coach when I'm doing coaching, I've said keep a record of all your achievements. So whenever, and this is psychology number 101, but it's basically a folder of things that I've achieved. It could be I've got a degree. It could be I've played tennis for competitively. I've won cups. I've won trophies. I've had a very good performance review with so and so. I've had, these are things that are, if you like, in my success folder. And if I'm feeling down at any time, I'll go to that success folder and I'll look through it. And I'll tell you what, time I've gone through it, I think, hey, I'm okay.
mm,
I'm a decent human being. I've got some skills and abilities, and I can do stuff. And it's just a way of giving yourself a boost, because when you're going through knockbacks and kickbacks, you need that. You need to have some way of keeping yourself up, and that's just something I've told lots and lots about my people that I've coached.
And here, from my experience, also, I can add a little bit on it because,
Mm,
anyway, both of us, we would like to help these people who are getting redundancies.
sure.
Is because in many of our lives, we just got sucked into like X because of X education got into Y company, because of Y company got into Z, or like a career path and stuff like that. So when you are sucked into that without any clear thought process, apart from, okay, I want to be an engineer or a certified professional or whatever, and when you get a halt, when you come to an halt, then suddenly reflecting and realizing what I really want is, people can do many miraculous things there, because now you have a little bit of a time, you realize that life was not the ride you are going through,
Mm,
many holes may come out, and that reflection, I know personally, you also know, definitely changed many people's life for good.
mm.
So that this type of halts, if people can take it as a stepping stone for next episode of their life, rather than, oh, I'm jobless, what will happen to me, I'm done, I'm finished, they will be in a much better mentally,
It's
psychological
it's a
space.
very good point, and as you're right, you're right by saying that if you've got that, considering it as a stepping stone, and you've done all the planning of thinking about what your next role is going to be and what you'd really like to do,
Yeah,
then you can more that helps you more easily see that yes, this is a stepping stone to the next stage of my life.
right.
Yeah.
You touched upon one thing. I would like to expand a little bit on that, which is normally people who are coming from collective societies like India, Bangladesh or Southeast Asians. Sometimes we struggle to understand individualist societies' norms
Mm,
or way of judging. I'm talking about little deeper than, like, having a football team, or having like you have to, or having a couple of drinks on Fridays. Little more deeper than that. What like few major things you have seen, or you can suggest to our audience?
yeah. I didn't have a football team, but I picked one. So I just said, I'll pick one,
Right.
and I'm not going to necessarily like the game 100%, but I'm going to follow one team, and I'm going to learn a little bit about the game, and I will try and understand not necessarily everything about AFL, but I will understand the players in my team. So I picked a team and did that.
Okay.
Even went to a couple of games. I think one of the things is, um, and if I had to think about what would have been useful to me, would have been somebody who could tell me that, who could tell me one, two, three, you need to at least have a football team. You need to understand that the culture is sort of self-mocking. It is drinks on Fridays. It is have a go. There's kind of, and it's okay to fail, and it's okay to question. I think one of the things that in my experience, people of um, Asian and Indian
Collective
culture,
society people. Okay, let's say Asians. Yeah.
Asian culture, there is often a reluctance to question.
Right.
And I think if I had to pick one thing that is perhaps different and something that needs to be understood by people, is that difference is an important one, because one of the I coached a person, a Japanese guy, and he a lovely guy, and very, very good at what he did in the medical profession, but he was not very good at questioning, not very good at projecting himself. And so the work I did with him was not so much anything to do with medicine. That's not my field anyway.
Mm.
But it was more about projecting himself and being prepared to stand up for himself and ask questions. And asking questions is a good thing in Australian society. It's not
Right.
it's not a negative. And
And,
don't sorry,
sorry.
go on.
And another thing I also personally felt like a big way before, and few of my friends also, like we discuss sometimes around it, which is like understanding emotion. I mean, the way we interpret emotion or the way we manifest emotion, Australian society does that very differently. I mean, if we, how is your, how do you think on that? Like, if we get upset on something, Asians will behave very differently than Caucasian. Or if we are frustrated, uh, our manifestations will be very different. If we are sad, our manifestations will be very different. So frustrated, annoyed, sad. Can you please expand on these three things? How we are culturally different a little bit.
Well, I may be I may maybe disagreeing with you there, Gautam, but to
Okay.
me there are differences in the way we our culture leads us to respond to things. But I think generally speaking, it's the human race. It's
Okay. Yeah, for
we
sure.
are we are races within the human race, and to me, there are more similarities between people than there are differences. So
Absolutely.
so if you're angry and you're from Calcutta, I'm angry, I'm from UK. It's we're angry.
We're angry. Yeah.
How we respond to it may be slightly different,
Yeah.
but I think I think that we all have those sorts of feelings. What I was going to say is that when you said to me, what are the things that you need to to understand if you're a new migrant into the country, what sort of things should you be learning? And I would say that what you have to do is pick somebody who you know you've got an affinity with, somebody who it could be somebody from the same cultural background, it could be somebody from different cultural background, but somebody who's been here a while and just sitting down and being open with that person or people and say, look, I'm struggling here. I'm wanting to fit in. I don't feel as if I'm fitting in. What
Yeah.
do I need to do? And then get some feedback from them because they're probably going to be able to tell you much more easily than any other way of doing it. The sort of things that you need to be aware of.
Right.
So
Okay.
find a buddy, basically.
Find a buddy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, when you are communicating, okay. So personally, I actually didn't. Actually struggled while when I was an employee. That if I'm frustrated, I mean
Mm,
I'm articulating my frustration, but sometimes it kind of came across rude
mm,
or not respectful. I didn't mean that. I mean, culturally, I mean, I didn't mean that. I know that internally, but the manifestation, the way it happened, it kind of, you know, sounded or, happened that way. So few those like hiccups happened, but during this communication, I personally don't like absolute transactional relationship. Many people can thrive on that. Okay, I know. I don't personally thrive on that. I need a little bit of a like a juicy,
You
emotion
need you need
or
feedback.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
feedback or like how the whole like holistic wise. It's not like A plus B is equal to something. It's
yeah.
like the holistic. Okay. In a communication in corporate world or in a professional world, um, transactional relationship versus this emotional, like a proper, respectful relationship where there is a honesty to it. how someone can balance it, or transactional relation can do good in some cases, or this will do good in some cases. What's your
Yeah,
opinion?
I think one of the things that I one of the things I've coached with people is understanding other personalities because whilst we are all part of the human race, we're all different, we're all unique, and there are certain traits that people have that you could sort of look at certain people and say that person I need to handle a certain way, and this person I need to handle a certain way. So part of that, I guess, communication skill is being able to recognize where that person sits, and then B, what is the best way of dealing with that person. And there are people, and you can call them what you will. I call them cold fish. I've come across a lot of bosses who are cold fish.
Right.
They don't want to have a relationship with you. They just want you to do your job and deliver results, whatever it might be. Now, in that situation, I will deal with that person in a way that I know he or she wants that to be related to them. And I won't worry about the niceties. Maybe there'll be a pleasant how are you and you know, did you have a good weekend or something. But mostly it will be get down to business because business is what they're looking for. One, two, three, I've done this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I need your help with this, whatever it might be, but being quite transactional, as you would call it. And then there are other people at the other end of the spectrum who are quite emotional, and uh, sometimes they can be angry, sometimes they can be sad, sometimes they can be life and soul of the party. But they want to have that kind of interaction. You will want to sit down with them and spend the first 10 minutes of the conversation on what happened with the football at the weekend.
Hmm.
I can think of a classic example of that. I was in the UK one time. I was selling to a person who was a golfer, and I wasn't a golfer at the time. But I asked him I was there to pick up a very substantial order for a lot of equipment for one of the companies I was working for, one of the vendors. And I didn't go in there and put the order in front of him. I just said, how was your golf at the weekend? And of course, off he went. He was next 10 minutes was telling me hole by hole what he did and so on and so forth. By the time it came to presenting the order for him to sign, he just signed it.
Yeah.
If I had got in there and done the transactional thing, here's the order, sign it, he would have just probably balked, or I may never have got that particular contract. So I think it's dealing with it's horses for courses, and I think it's one of the skills that individuals need, particularly if they're new into the country, is to be able to read that and understand what makes that person tick and how to deal with them. Does
Right.
that make sense?
So that means you are talking basically about like how I am self-aware about myself,
Yes,
and how I am aware of in situations how I will behave. So if it is transactional, okay, so be it. If it is emotional, so be it.
it's
So
more understanding the person that you're dealing with,
you're dealing with.
getting
And
a good understanding of what makes them tick.
right. And this is actually a very big difference in like from collective society. We mostly believe that the way I'm behaving, everyone is kind of behaving that way. Because
When you
as a
say collective, what do you mean by collective?
collective society means like typically developed worlds are individualistic societies, and developing countries where because of the less resource or less available resources or facilities outside, people try to stick together and do problem solving that way. So India is more collective society than Australia or UK, so that way. So, and because of societal norms, collective society, people think that, okay, in my clan, the way I'm behaving, everyone is behaving that way. In individualistic society, it is absolutely different. And because, and that is why probably it is more important that to understand what other people are kind of saying, or the way they are seeing the world.
Is it so very different though? Because I know that um, there is a reason for, or often enough, there's an individual is looking to achieve certain objectives, and they want to achieve those objectives. But in order to achieve those objectives, they've actually got to work as a team, often enough, to
Yes.
get things done. So to me, the idea of having purely individuals as an individualistic society doesn't work, because as a manager, I've got 100 people working for me, and those 100 people have all got to perform for me to be successful. So, so from a team perspective, it's the same thing. But I still think that irrespective of the team situation, individuals will I mean, even within a team, 100 people, they're all going to be different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And some people you've actually just got they want a big picture. And some people just want to have a picture drawn, so that, like, the chief executive often enough is a strategy person and will want to see a picture of what it's going to look like, say, over the next 12 months. A detailed person, maybe a project manager or a financial person, will want to look at a spreadsheet from A to B and understand everything in it. So the way I present any proposal, if I'm going to in front of somebody, and if it's a chief executive who has the big picture, I'm going to draw pictures. If
Yeah,
it's a financial person, I may have a picture, but I'm going to have lots and lots and lots of details, because that's what they want to see. So
right,
again, it's recognizing who you're dealing with, and and connecting with that person at the level that they want to connect.
right.
That's a skill
That's a skill.
that needs to
Absolutely.
be developed.
In a lot of job interviews before, I have seen personality te- tests or personal profiling tools they use to
Yeah.
understand. Okay. In like, I don't know, in between it became a bit controversial, and then few people came and talk about it more. So what's the situation? I mean, personally, for me, when I first did that personality profiling tool, like tests, I became aware of myself more than anything else.
Hmm. Yep.
um, like, I still struggle to deal with different people, but I know in that what kind of emotional situation, how I behave or how I respond to it.
Yep.
What do you think this profiling is necessary for a job versus more self-awareness, self-understanding?
Well, I think personality profile is, or personality profiles are a useful part of the picture. They're not the only thing, but
True.
they're a useful picture to have. There's things like Myers-Briggs, where
Yes.
there's various categories, and I think I'm an ENTJ or something, um, and and that's useful to understand that, and it's probably useful. I've sometimes used it with other people, and I've tried to pick what personality profile they have, and I'm usually not far out. Um, Perhaps because I'm quite good at reading people, but so it's useful. One of the best, to me, those profiling tools are good, and some companies like to use them as well, as so that they can get a picture of the individual. Um, One of the best tools that I've come across is what's called a 360, and I don't know if you've come across it, Gautam.
Now, I am big fan of Big Five, that ocean
Yep, yep,
methodology.
yep, yep. Yeah. The 360 is not a profiling tool as such, but what it is, it's basically, I'm a boss and I have 20 people working for me, let's say, as an example. What I will do is I will get a selection of maybe all the 20 or 10 or 12, whatever, and I will get each of them to assess what they think of me in terms of certain criteria. And it might be, how well do I let them do their job? How well am I a good leader? What do I do in terms of support? How do I support them? It's just a whole series of questions. Okay. And one of um, the best time, sorry, the first time I did that, it was a revelation. It was many, many years ago, back in New Zealand. And I got feedback from A, people who worked for me, and B, my peers, and C, my bosses. And it was interesting because some of the things were what I'd expect. Yes, Rod is good at this and good at that. And there's others completely out of the blue where I'm thinking, oh, that's interesting. I thought I was good at that. Perhaps I'm not so good. But it's honest feedback from a variety of people about where you have strengths and where you have things that need to improve. And I reckon that's probably the best profiling tool I've ever come across.
Right. Okay.
And
So,
I used to do it a lot with my clients. Often enough, I would get the people I was coaching to do a 360 of their workplace,
right.
and certainly I've had some great results from that. Some self-revelations that would never have come about from any other profiling tool.
Right, right. So that means like before dealing with the world, it's more important to deal your internal being, you know, and that will actually help you to work better outside. Okay.
Understanding where you need to improve,
Yeah,
you need to
exactly.
get better at. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we are almost end of it. So the because you are also immigrant and I'm also immigrant, and one of our pillars of this podcast is immigration. So people who wants to come to Australia or just arrived, just give few top five things like they should look for in Australia to have a fabulous life because this country offers really, really, really good life.
Yeah. I think I agree. It's I've traveled around the world and I've worked in 3 different countries and actually have 3 passports. So that's quite interesting. Um, One of the things I think is what I would guess probably would be something that would be useful or would have been useful to me when I first arrived in the new country would have been somebody to be able to say, here's some simple stuff. I don't necessarily want to be given a job on a plate when I get here. What are the things that I need to know? How do
Hmm.
I get my security clearances? How do I get my Medicare card? How do I get my how do the banks work? What do
Like,
I,
yeah, it's like
somebody to
public
give
transport
your,
card or whatever.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, transport card, all of those things that are, I could work my way through them, but if you're an immigrant, and particularly if English is a second language, then it's not necessarily easy.
And if they're
So,
coming with their families.
exactly, yeah. So to me, it would be um, if I could have had somebody do that for me, or some way of getting that information, that would have been really useful. Other than that, I think it's a case of talking to people, getting out and doing stuff, and meeting people. Um, get a football team if you're in Melbourne, and understand how how it works. Drinks on Friday, whatever it might be. All of those. just get some background from people, possibly from your own network and people of the same culture, or possibly people from the culture that you're moving into, but get some way of picking up some friends, and that's important. I didn't have any friends when I first came to Australia, and
Not
I'm
not just sitting and
enjoyed.
searching on the net. Have a human conversation.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely, yeah. Social media is fine up to a point, but
Up to
there's
the
no
point, yes.
substitute for talking to people.
Yeah. And last thing is from my end, which is look after your mental health. Because when an immigrant comes to a new land, because of the lack of family and friends, and a lot of things are going in their head, a lot of uncertainties. Uh, Sometimes they feel lonely, sometimes they lose their mind. So look after your mental health. If necessary, go to a professional, talk to them, talk to your friends.
Yep.
So on that, thank you, Rod, for
Thank you,
coming to
Gautam.
come
Been a
to our
pleasure.
podcast. And yeah, we will keep talking down the line with some other topics.
Good luck. Thanks, Gautam.
Thank you. Have a good one.